I've been consuming DC Comics, animated content, and movies all my life, and I just realized that even after all these decades, I still can't give straight answers to some very open-ended questions. Such as the nature of the rich and extensive DC lore, that there remains some ambiguity in the narrative that hasn't been resolved in all this time. Of course, a lot of compelling questions have finally been answered, but there are still quite a few that remain to be explained properly. Yes, there are loads of fan theories and speculation, but concrete and definitive answers are what we seek, isn't it? In this video, I'll explore some of the most daunting, open-ended questions from the DC universe that have kept me up many nights. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, let's begin. What lies beyond the Source Wall? For those who don't know, the Source Wall is one of the great cosmic mysteries in the DC universe. It functions as a literal and symbolic boundary at the edge of each universe in the multiverse, and it also marks the limit of knowledge in existence. Thus, what lies beyond the Source Wall has remained one of the most persistent questions in the DC universe. It resembles an impenetrable barrier, which is visually marked by the bodies of the Promethean giants, which are cosmic beings who tried to breach the wall and failed. Now, the Source Wall protects the multiverse by keeping out cosmic threats like anti-life and the Dark Multiverse, and it was reportedly created to imprison Perpetua, a primeval cosmic entity who threatens the very existence of the multiverse. It's been indicated that on the other side of the wall is the Source, which is a metaphysical, omnipotent energy that is the root of all energy and creation in the DC universe, which is equivalent to a stand-in for God. There have been several attempts to breach the Source Wall by mortals and gods, but all have failed. In some stories like Dark Knights, Death Metal, and Justice League No Justice, the wall has been damaged and cracked open, and threats like Perpetua have been released. But even with these breaches, the mystery of what lies beyond the Source Wall has not been solved. I wonder what it is that even the greatest DC gods and superheroes have been denied knowledge of. The mystery around the Phantom Stranger's origin. The Phantom Stranger might be one of the most underrated DC heroes, and he also remains one of the greatest mysteries by design, with several competing origin stories and no confirmed ones. Usually, most superheroes have a definitive backstory established, but not the Phantom Stranger, whose ambiguity is an intentional part of his mythos. One origin story presents him as a wanderer who's been cursed to roam the earth after the death of his family during the massacre of the innocents. He seeks revenge and is eventually cursed by God, but when redemption is offered, he refuses it and chooses to remain a wanderer. Another backstory suggests that he was saved from the wrath of God by an angel, but he committed suicide to question divine justice. As a punishment, his soul was resurrected with amnesia and condemned to wander the world to help others atone for their sins. This is also a story arc that presents the Phantom Stranger as a scientist stuck in a time loop who fights another scientist who wants to end all creation. Of course, we can't forget the fallen angel narrative, where he remained neutral during Lucifer's rebellion, and as punishment, he was sentenced to walk the earth. Also, a more recent version portrays him as Judas Iscariot, who is punished for betraying Jesus, and he's doomed for all eternity to wander around. Clearly, nobody could make up their mind about the definitive backstory of this memorable character, and his identity mystery has turned into his defining trait. It serves his role as that of a mysterious guide, and I think we are never truly meant to know or understand who he really is. Such is the nature of his character. Who was really behind Dream's downfall in the DC universe? There are few who can ignore the charms of the Sandman series, and the brilliance of this Neil Gaiman classic lies in how he leaves several plot threads and concepts intentionally ambiguous. There have been a lot of speculations since the 1996 finale, and one of the most exciting, open-ended questions in this fantasy series is around the one who's really responsible for the downfall of the protagonist Dream. You could say that the former superhero Lita Hall is to be blamed, because she's the one who called down the bloodthirsty Furies on the Lord of the Dreams. But a lot does happen in the lead-up to Dream's demise. Lita Hall had no control over these events, and to blame her single-handedly wouldn't be wise. Meanwhile, the motivations and actions of several of Dream's enemies, like Lucifer, Loki, and Desire, are murky and confusing, which leaves the definitive answer out of the way. Also, Dream's own inability to adapt and forgive, especially when it came to personal slights and failing relationships, can be held accountable, and thus there cannot be one clear answer to this question.
We should talk.
What would have happened if Superman and Black Adam faced off in the DCEU? The cinematic adaptation of Black Adam came with a ton of expectations, and Dwayne Johnson was a major booster for the DCEU. The mid-credit scene ended with the first ever live-action face-off between Black Adam and Superman, played by Henry Cavill. This was truly a mouth-watering moment for the fans, and the Titanic characters facing off were like the ideal dream sequence that was planned to set up for the most epic superhero fight ever. The idea was to set up a future movie that could bring the two together, and the fans started wondering if the fight would take place in Kondak or Metropolis, or if it would expand to other locations as well. Also, the fate of this much-awaited fight remained a subject of fandom, only to have the dreams squashed when both Johnson and Cavill acknowledged that they wouldn't be part of the new DCU. Now, there are instances in the comic books where Superman and Black Adam have fought each other, but seeing them fight in a live-action movie would have been something else. It's not entirely impossible that the new Superman, played by David Cornsweet, comes across some version of Black Adam in the future, but it will never be the same level of hype without Henry Cavill and Dwayne Johnson in the picture. Who was the second holiday killer in Batman: The Long Halloween? If you consider modern Batman comics, I don't think you will get too many parallels to this unsolved mystery from Batman: The Long Halloween. The narrative initially leads you to believe that all of the holiday killings were committed by Alberto Falcone, who even confessed after being unmasked. However, the final issues of the comic series bring in some ambiguity as well. It's been suggested that there could be multiple holiday killers, and after killing Carmine Falcone and Vernon on Halloween, Harvey Dent, who is now Two-Face, tells Batman and Gordon that there are two holiday killers. This has been interpreted simply as the other killer being Two-Face himself, but the real twist comes when Gilda Dent, his wife, is seen burning evidence, and confesses to have started the holiday killings herself. They were done to free her husband from the burdens and create a better life for them, and the original intention was to target the Falcone family. However, the overall narrative purposefully keeps the identity of the actual second holiday killer a mystery and open to interpretations. The actions and sequencing of each killer remains a deliberate mystery to keep the climax unresolved. And I'd love to hear your take on this matter. What's the mystery around the Empty Hand? The Empty Hand has served as one of DC's most enigmatic and powerful villains. And while the character is shrouded in symbolic presentations, there also remains a lot of cosmic mystery around him. He first appeared in Multiversity by Grant Morrison in 2014, and the role of the Empty Hand was to be the mastermind behind the Gentry, which is a group of multidimensional horrors intent on corrupting the DC multiverse. The entity has been described as the right hand of the Great Darkness, and the Empty Hand was nearly omnipotent and capable of erasing universes and manipulating reality. Grant Morrison explained that the Empty Hand is a metafictional representation of the reader's hand, which is the ultimate force that can close the comic and end the story. Some early clues suggested the Empty Hand might be the creator of the multiverse, but the later stories clearly refuted this and established that the Empty Hand stands outside the established hierarchy. Even now, the actual roots and connections to the Great Darkness or the true agenda of the Empty Hand remain a mystery that deserves a second thought. Unfortunately, the Empty Hand has disappeared, and the last appearance was a throwaway cameo in Dark Crisis. Since even the disappearance hasn't been explained, a lot about him remains to be deciphered in future storylines. Who was actually the Skeleton? The Skeleton was one of the most intriguing new DC characters in the early 2000s, when Brian K. Vaughan remained the main writer for Batman's run. The Skeleton was quite a mysterious character, and his only known power was that he could mimic any villain that he wanted to. The goal of the Skeleton was to join the ranks of characters who killed Batman, and he said something about how Bruce Wayne's past had wronged them. Now, this is actually dicey terrain because there are far too many villains who could technically be dubbed as Batman's fault. This could have well been a new character or someone that Bruce always knew, but the curiosity of the fans was never answered. The character only appeared this one time, and the Skeleton has never come back since. I think that it's extremely unlikely that this character will ever be reintroduced, but if they do, we would love to get some answers to his real identity. Where did Dr. Stratos disappear? This is something that has been observed by the confused fans who followed the events of Adventures of Superman by Marv Wolfman and Eric Larson. They introduced the lesser-known villain Dr. Stratos, who even proved to be someone who could defeat the mighty Superman. However, this rare victory against the Man of Steel didn't ensure a longer run for the character. If you need to revisit your memory about Dr. Stratos, he was at the receiving end of an experiment gone wrong, and it seemingly resulted in his accidental death by falling into the ocean. But he actually transformed into a powerful giant seeking revenge on Superman. Unfortunately, this was also the last appearance of Dr. Stratos, because Wolfman left after 6 issues, and the fate of the character was left hanging. It's still probably a wary reminder for Superman that his nemesis could always stage a comeback, but where he disappeared to is something we can only speculate. What is the real identity of the Time Trapper? The Time Trapper has always been a mysterious character in DC Comics, especially when you consider his association with the Legion of Superheroes. The early stories suggest that the Time Trapper was one of the Controllers, a powerful offshoot of the Guardians of the Universe. Again, in some continuities, especially post-Crisis, the Time Trapper was depicted as a future version of Rock Kryn, one of the Legion's founders. There are many other different narratives, and the timeline has been prone to reboots, crises, and paradoxes, which only mean that different characters can become the Time Trapper. The shifting identity of the Time Trapper has been used by the writers to comment on the malleability of time and story continuity in comics. All we know is that he's never supposed to have a single unchanging identity, but there's still a lot to know about the Trapper, which is a deliberate open-ended mystery left for us by the DC Universe. Do we actually know the real identity of the Joker? I think we can all agree that the real identity of the Joker has been one of the most enduring mysteries in the DC Universe. The topic has been riddled with numerous storylines and conflicting narratives, which have only created more confusion. For decades, his real name was left unknown intentionally, so that it added to the mysterious charm of the character. Multiple stories in the comic books and even in films have used different names and backstories to elaborate on the character. The most notable of them have to be that of Jack Napier in the 1989 Batman film, and Arthur Fleck from the 2019 Joker movie. However, they haven't been considered canon, and the mystery still remains. As far as the main DC Comics continuity is concerned, the most significant development in this regard came in Flashpoint Beyond, when Martha Wayne, who became the Joker in her universe, interrogated Psycho Pirate, who knew secrets from across the universe. She found out that the real name of the Joker in the main DC universe was Jack Oswald White. But even with this official name reveal, there remains some ambiguity because of the unreliable narrative within the DC universe. For instance, the Three Jokers storyline indicates that there are multiple Jokers in the DC universe, and classic stories like The Killing Joke have presented his backstory as unreliable, because Joker himself says, if I'm going to have a past, I prefer it to be multiple choice. Maybe someday we'll have some convincing answers regarding Joker's real identity, or maybe it's best that we never do, and the air of mystery remains around the character. Marvelous verdict. Mysteries actually keep the spark alive. I find it quite amusing that even after all these years and some of the best minds in business put together, we still have so many unresolved issues in the DC lore. That being said, I can't really complain because such mysteries only add to the charm of the stories. Not everything needs to be laid out clearly, and it actually helps if the fans get to speculate and interpret their own answers to some questions. Of course, such open-ended stuff is bound to be there because there are different people involved in the writing and making of different versions of a character, and the stories don't always coincide. Overall, what I'm trying to say is that such unresolved mysteries are quite natural and inevitable, and it's always fun to find out some of these answers with time through movie adaptations of future comic book narratives. Do let me know in the comments below which one of these mysteries you think is the most intriguing, and also tell me about your take on some of these questions that I explored. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.